My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 33 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed that no matter how complicated family became, blood would always matter. I was wrong. 3 months ago, I flew from Seattle to California for my younger sister's wedding. It wasn't a short weekend trip. I took a full week off work, spent nearly $3,000 on flights, a hotel, and the perfect wedding gift. More importantly, I had personally guaranteed almost every major wedding contract because my parents said my credit score was the only one good enough. The venue. The caterer. The florist. The photographer. Every signature belonged to me. But when I arrived at the vineyard where my sister was getting married, my own mother stepped in front of the entrance and quietly said 5 words that changed everything. "You weren't invited. Please leave." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Before I tell you exactly what happened, let me take you back 4 months. It all started on a sunny afternoon while I was finishing work from my apartment in Seattle. My phone lit up with a FaceTime request from my younger sister, Emma Carter. She looked happier than I'd seen her in years. "I'm engaged," she shouted before I could even say hello. Behind her stood our mother, Linda, smiling while decorating cookies in the kitchen of our family home in Santa Barbara, California. I couldn't stop smiling. "Oh my God, Emma. Congratulations." She held her hand toward the camera, showing a sparkling diamond ring. Ryan proposed during sunset in Napa Valley. It sounded exactly like something from a romantic movie. We talked about dresses, flowers, music, and honeymoon plans for almost 20 minutes. I was already checking airline prices in another browser tab. Then I asked the obvious question. "So, when should I fly in?" For just a second, both Emma and Mom looked at each other. It was subtle. But I noticed. Mom answered first. "Oh sweetheart, don't spend too much money. It'll be a very small wedding." I laughed. "Mom, she's my sister." Another pause. "We'll see," she replied. The call ended a few minutes later. I remember staring at my black phone screen. Something felt off. I couldn't explain why. I convinced myself they were simply overwhelmed by wedding planning. A week later my mother called again. Not to ask how I was doing. She needed a favor. "The vineyard requires someone with excellent credit to sign the contracts," she explained. "Emma and Ryan are just starting their lives together." I already knew where the conversation was heading. "How much?" "Only the deposits now," she answered quickly. "The rest will be charged after the wedding." I hesitated. The total value of every contract was over $39,000. That number made my stomach tighten. But she reminded me of something she'd said my entire life. "You're the oldest. Family takes care of family." So, I signed every document. And I had no idea I was paying for a wedding I would never be allowed to attend. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. I just kept refusing to see them. Over the next 3 months, the wedding slowly came together, but somehow, I was never really part of it. Emma created a group chat called the Bennett Wedding Crew. I wasn't added. I only found out it existed after she accidentally forwarded me a message asking everyone to vote on bridesmaid dresses. My name wasn't anywhere on the list. I called her that evening. "Do you already have bridesmaids?" I asked. "Oh. Yeah," she answered awkwardly. "Ryan's sisters and a couple of my friends." I forced a smile she couldn't even see. "I thought maybe I'd stand with you." She laughed softly. "You'll still be there." Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they felt strangely empty. Days turned into weeks. Photos appeared online almost every weekend. Cake tastings. Dress fittings. Bridal brunches. Wine tours in Napa. Family dinners. Everyone smiling together. Everyone. Except me. Whenever I asked if there was anything I could help with, Mom always gave the same answer. Everything's under control, sweetheart. One afternoon I texted Emma. What color should I wear? She didn't reply until the next morning. Anything elegant is fine. No details. No excitement. Nothing. It was as if I were another guest instead of her sister. Still, I ignored every red flag. I booked my flights. Seattle to Los Angeles. Reserved 4 nights at a boutique hotel in Santa Barbara. Bought a navy blue designer dress I'd been saving for. Even ordered an expensive espresso machine from her wedding registry because she'd mentioned wanting one months earlier. By the time the trip arrived, I'd spent almost $3,200. None of it bothered me. She was my little sister. She was worth it. A week before the ceremony, I noticed something else. Emma uploaded rehearsal dinner photos. The caption read, "My favorite people in the world, red heart." There they were. Mom. Dad. Ryan. His parents. The bridesmaids. The groomsmen. Even distant cousins. I wasn't there. Nobody had told me there even was a rehearsal dinner. For the first time, I almost picked up the phone to ask why. Instead, I convinced myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe they assumed I couldn't arrive early enough. Maybe they forgot. Maybe I was simply overthinking everything. That's what I'd been doing my entire life. Making excuses for people who never apologized. The morning of my flight finally arrived. As my plane climbed above the clouds, I opened the Notes app on my phone. I'd been writing a speech for Emma for nearly a month. It wasn't long. Just 2 minutes. I wanted to tell everyone how she used to steal my blankets as a little girl because she was afraid of thunderstorms. How she'd insisted I check under her bed for monsters until she was 12. How proud I was of the woman she'd become. Halfway through reading it, I actually started crying. Not because I was sad. Because I couldn't wait to hug my sister. I honestly believed the wedding would bring our family closer again. I had no idea that, less than 24 hours later, my own mother would tell me I didn't belong there. I landed in Los Angeles on a warm Friday afternoon and drove the scenic highway back to Santa Barbara. The closer I got to home, the more excited I became. I even stopped at a small bakery and bought Emma's favorite lemon macarons. She had loved them since we were kids. I thought she'd smile when she saw them. At my hotel, I unpacked carefully, steamed my dress, and placed her wedding gift beside the door so I wouldn't forget it in the morning. Before going to bed, I sent Mom a text. "I'm here. What time should I come tomorrow?" Almost an hour passed before she replied. "Ceremony starts at 3 o'clock. That was it. "No, can't wait to see you. No, come early. No, let's have breakfast together." Just 3 words. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Something inside me felt uneasy again. The next afternoon, I arrived at Golden Crest Vineyard, one of the most beautiful wineries in Santa Barbara County. Rows of vineyards stretched across the hills. White roses decorated the entrance. A string quartet was already playing soft music. Guests laughed as they walked toward the ceremony. Everything looked perfect. I grabbed Emma's gift, took a deep breath, and started walking. Then I saw my father. He was standing near the entrance talking with several guests. The moment he noticed me, his smile disappeared. For a second our eyes met. Instead of walking over to hug me, he quietly turned around and disappeared inside the venue. My heart skipped. That wasn't like him. I kept walking. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he didn't see me clearly. I was only a few steps from the entrance when the wooden doors opened. My mother walked outside. She looked elegant in a champagne-colored dress. Her makeup was flawless. Her expression wasn't. She stopped directly in front of me. blocking the entrance. "Hi, Mom." I leaned forward, expecting a hug. She didn't move. Instead, she looked around to make sure no guests were listening. Then she spoke in a calm voice. "Olivia, you need to leave." I laughed nervously. "What? You can't come inside." I honestly thought I had misunderstood. "I flew here yesterday." "I know. I signed every contract." "I know. I paid every deposit." "I know." She looked me straight in the eyes. "But you weren't invited." The world suddenly became silent. The music. The conversations. The laughter. Everything faded. "I don't understand." Mom folded her hands together. "It'll only make things complicated." "Complicated for who?" She didn't answer. Instead she whispered. "Ryan's family doesn't know about you." I blinked. What does that even mean? "They think Emma is our only daughter." For several seconds. I couldn't breathe. I searched her face, hoping she would smile and tell me it was some horrible misunderstanding. She never did. Just then, another woman stepped outside. Elegant. Confident. Probably in her early 60s. She smiled warmly. "Linda, is everything all right?" My mother answered before I could say a single word. "Oh, everything's fine. She's just a family acquaintance who stopped by to congratulate Emma." A family acquaintance. Not her daughter. Not Emma's sister. Not even family. I felt my hands tighten around the wrapped wedding gift. At that exact moment, I realized this hadn't been an accident. It had been planned from the very beginning. I stood there for what felt like forever. The wrapped espresso machine suddenly seemed impossibly heavy in my hands. Guests continued walking past us, smiling, laughing, completely unaware that my own mother had just erased me from our family. I looked toward the ceremony. Through the open doors, I could see rows of white chairs, crystal chandeliers, and fresh flowers. Everything looked exactly the way Emma had dreamed. Everything that I had helped pay for. For one brief moment, I imagined walking inside. I imagined standing in front of every guest and saying, "My name is Olivia Carter. I'm Emma's older sister, and every major vendor for this wedding is under my name." The room would fall silent. Ryan would look confused. His parents would demand answers. My mother would have nowhere left to hide. I could have done it. I had every right to. But then I looked at my father. He was standing just inside the entrance. Watching. Still saying nothing. That hurt more than anything. I slowly placed Emma's gift on a nearby wooden bench. "If she wants it," I whispered. "It's hers." Without another word, I turned around and walked back toward the parking lot. I never looked behind me. Not once. The drive back to the hotel was a blur. I don't remember the traffic. I don't remember the music. I only remember the silence. Inside my room, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the bed. My phone buzzed several times. Friends had started posting wedding photos online. Emma looked radiant. My parents were smiling beside her as if nothing had happened. As if they had always been a happy family. A family without me. I turned the phone face down. Then I opened my laptop. An email notification caught my attention. Golden Crest Vineyard. I clicked it. Final balance due after event. Another email. The caterer. Another. The florist. Another. The photographer. Every invoice carried the same name. Contract holder, Olivia Carter. My signature. My billing information. My responsibility. I quickly grabbed the original contracts I'd saved in a folder months earlier. One after another. I checked every page. My hand started shaking. The remaining balance wasn't a few $1,000s. It was $39,240. Every dollar was legally attached to me. Not my parents. Not Emma. Me. I sat frozen. They hadn't simply hidden me from the wedding. They had hidden me, while keeping my name on every bill. At 9:30 that evening, my phone rang. The screen showed a name I hadn't seen in months. Aunt Rebecca. Dad's older sister. She rarely called unless something serious had happened. I answered. Olivia. Her voice was unusually quiet. I just heard what your mother did. I closed my eyes. So, everyone knows? No, she replied. They don't know the whole truth. A long silence followed. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. Ryan's family doesn't think you're dead. I frowned. What? They think your parents only ever had one daughter. I couldn't speak. Rebecca sighed. Linda has been telling that story for years. Every time someone asked about your family, she introduced Emma as her only child. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't about the wedding, Olivia. It never was. They erased you long before today. For the first time all evening. I stopped crying. Something inside me changed. The sadness was still there. But now, it was becoming something else. Something much calmer. Much stronger. I looked once more at the invoices on my screen. Then I quietly whispered to myself. I'm done paying to belong where I was never wanted. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's voice again. You weren't invited. By sunrise, the sadness had faded. What remained was clarity. I brewed a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and spread every contract across the small desk in my hotel room. For the first time, I read every page carefully. Not as a loving sister. As the legal contract holder. Each agreement contained the same sentence. The undersigned client reserves the right to approve or decline final payment before processing. I read it twice. Then a third time. I wasn't just responsible for the balance. I controlled whether those charges could even be processed. I opened my phone and called the Vineyard first. A cheerful receptionist answered. Golden Crest Vineyard, this is Megan. Hello. My name is Olivia Carter. I'm the contract holder for yesterday's Carter Bennett wedding. Yes, Ms. Carter. Congratulations to the newlyweds. How may I help you? I took a slow breath. I need to remove my payment authorization. Silence. I'm sorry. I was denied entry to the wedding. I did not receive the services covered under this agreement. I will not authorize the remaining payment. Another pause. I'll need to transfer you to our manager. 5 minutes later, the manager came on the line. He remained calm and professional. After confirming my identity, he simply said, If you're withdrawing authorization, we'll have to invoice the event hosts directly. Please do. He thanked me and ended the call. That was easier than I expected. Next came the caterer. Then the florist. Then the photographer. Every conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. No yelling. No threats. No emotional speeches. Just facts. By lunchtime, every vendor had removed my payment authorization. For the first time in months, I felt like I had taken back control of my own life. Around 2 o'clock, I packed my suitcase and checked out of the hotel. As I walked through the lobby, the receptionist smiled. Did you enjoy the wedding? I smiled politely. It was unforgettable. She laughed, having no idea how true that was. The next morning, I landed back in Seattle. Rain tapped softly against the airport windows. Home. I had barely unlocked my apartment when my phone rang. Mom. I knew exactly why she was calling. I answered anyway. Olivia, she said, her voice unusually sweet. The vineyard called us this morning. I remained silent. They said you've removed your payment authorization. That's correct. A long pause followed. They must have made some mistake. They didn't. Olivia. She sighed. The balance is almost $40,000. I know. You need to fix this. I looked out my apartment window. Gray clouds covered the Seattle skyline. For the first time in years. I didn't feel guilty. I wasn't welcome at the wedding. That has nothing to do with the contracts. It has everything to do with them. Her voice sharpened. You're being selfish. I almost laughed. Selfish. After paying deposits. Buying gifts. Flying across the country. Being turned away at the entrance. No, I answered quietly. For the first time. I'm simply refusing to be used. Silence filled the line. Then, in a cold voice, she whispered. You'll regret this. Before I could answer. She hung up. I placed my phone on the kitchen counter. It rang again less than 30 minutes later. This time. It was Emma. Emma didn't even say hello. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Olivia, please, you have to help us. I stayed quiet. The vineyard, the caterer, everyone is calling. Ryan's parents are asking questions. They think there's been some kind of mistake. There wasn't. You don't understand, she cried. We can't afford this. I leaned against the kitchen counter. No, Emma. I understand perfectly. Another silence. Then she whispered. Please, just pay it. We'll figure everything out later. I closed my eyes. Like always? What does that mean? It means I've spent years fixing problems that weren't mine. She didn't answer. Instead, she started crying even harder. You don't know what Mom is going through. I took a slow breath. Really? She's devastated. Was she devastated when she told everyone I didn't exist? Emma hesitated. Only for a second. But it was enough. I didn't think she'd actually stop you at the entrance. Every muscle in my body froze. What did you just say? You knew. Silence. Emma. I knew Mom didn't want you there, she admitted quietly. But she told me she'd find a way to explain everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So the entire time. You knew I wasn't invited? She began sobbing again. I didn't think she'd go that far. You watched me buy a plane ticket. I'm sorry. You thanked me for signing every contract. I'm sorry. You accepted my wedding gift. I'm sorry. Every apology sounded exactly the same. Empty. Too late. I walked to the window and watched the rain fall across the city. When were you planning to tell me? I wasn't. The words slipped out before she realized what she'd said. Neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered. I didn't want to ruin the wedding. I nodded slowly. No. You were willing to ruin your sister instead. She started crying again. Please don't say that. But it's true. Another long silence. Then her voice became almost desperate. Ryan is furious. He just found out Mom told his family you're not part of ours. So he never knew. No. And neither did his parents. No. I sighed. The truth always catches up. Olivia, please. This isn't just about the money anymore. I know. No, you don't. I paused before saying the words I had needed to say for years. You didn't lose my trust at the wedding. You lost it long before that. When you decided keeping Mom happy was more important than telling me the truth. She whispered my name. I didn't answer. Instead, I ended the call. For several minutes, I simply stared at the dark screen of my phone. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even crying. The hardest part wasn't realizing my mother had lied. It was realizing my sister had chosen to stand beside her. That afternoon I opened my contacts. Without hesitation. I blocked my mother's number. Then my father's. Finally, Emma's. For the first time in my life, I chose peace over guilt. And somehow, it felt like freedom. 3 days passed. My phone stayed silent. No calls. No messages. No apologies. Then, on Thursday afternoon, my Aunt Rebecca called. For the first time since everything happened. She sounded almost satisfied. I thought you should know what's happening in Santa Barbara. I sat down with my coffee. What happened? I finally spoke with Margaret Bennett, Ryan's mother. The woman my own mother had smiled at while pretending I didn't exist. You called her? I did. What did you say? Rebecca sighed. I told her the truth. My heart skipped. I told her you are Linda's oldest daughter. I told her you signed every wedding contract. I told her you flew across the country only to be turned away at the entrance. Silence. Then she added quietly. Margaret had absolutely no idea. Apparently, Ryan's parents believed my parents had only one child. For years. That had been the story. Rebecca continued. Margaret kept asking the same question. Why would a mother do something like that? I didn't have an answer. Neither did she. Later that evening, Rebecca called again. You won't believe what happened. Margaret had confronted my mother immediately after learning the truth. Not privately. In front of Ryan, Emma, and the rest of the Bennett family. According to Rebecca, Margaret looked directly at Mom and asked, Is Olivia really your daughter? Mom hesitated. Only for a second. But everyone noticed. Finally she nodded. Yes. Margaret's expression changed instantly. So the woman you introduced as a family acquaintance was your own child? No one spoke. Ryan slowly turned toward Emma. You knew? Emma couldn't even look at him. You knew? She nodded. His face fell. You let your sister fly here, knowing she wasn't welcome? Emma burst into tears. Ryan stepped away from her. Not angrily. Just disappointed. The room was silent. Then Margaret said something no one expected. My family was lied to from the beginning. She looked at my parents. We welcomed you into our lives because we believed you were honest people. She shook her head. I don't even recognize you. The confrontation didn't end there. Within hours, relatives began calling one another. Neighbors heard pieces of the story. Friends started asking questions. Someone remembered seeing me arrive at the vineyard. Someone else remembered watching me leave alone. The truth spread faster than anyone expected. By Friday morning, half of Santa Barbara seemed to know. People weren't talking about the beautiful wedding anymore. They were talking about the daughter who had been erased from her own family. Rebecca laughed softly. You know what surprised me the most? What? Nobody is defending your mother. Apparently, even people who had known my parents for decades were shocked. Several admitted they had always wondered why I was never mentioned. Others confessed they didn't even know I existed. Years of pretending had finally caught up with them. That evening, my father sent me a single email. No excuses. No requests. Just one sentence. I should have stopped it. I stared at those 5 words for a long time. It wasn't enough. Not even close. But for the first time, someone in my family had admitted the truth. And somehow, that mattered. I read my father's email at least 10 times. I should have stopped it. 5 simple words. For most people, they wouldn't mean much. For my father, they were the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received. Still, I couldn't answer. Not yet. Some wounds needed more than a sentence. They needed honesty. A week later, another email arrived. This one was much longer. Subject: I owe you the truth. I opened it slowly. Olivia. I've spent every day since the wedding replaying that afternoon in my head. I watched your mother stop you at those doors, and I did nothing. I wish I could tell you there was a good reason. There wasn't. I was afraid. Not of you. Of upsetting your mother. I've been choosing the easier path for more than 20 years, and every time I stayed silent, it became easier to stay silent again. I convinced myself that keeping peace inside our house was the same thing as protecting our family. I was wrong. Instead of protecting my family, I failed one of my daughters. You deserved a father who stood beside you. I wasn't that father. I'm deeply sorry. By the time I reached the end, my eyes were full of tears. Not because everything was forgiven. Because for the first time, someone had finally admitted exactly what happened. Without excuses. Without blaming anyone else. While I was deciding whether to reply, life in Santa Barbara kept unraveling. Rebecca called almost every Sunday. According to her, Mom had stopped attending neighborhood gatherings. People whispered when she entered restaurants. Church friends suddenly became distant. Even longtime neighbors avoided conversations. Years of carefully protecting her image had disappeared in less than 2 weeks. She keeps saying everyone betrayed her, Rebecca told me. I looked out the window. No. She betrayed herself. Emma wasn't doing much better. Ryan had moved into the guest bedroom. They barely spoke except when absolutely necessary. His parents had made one thing painfully clear. Marriage could survive financial problems. It could survive stress. But beginning a marriage with lies was something entirely different. According to Rebecca, Ryan asked Emma one question almost every day. If you could hide something this important from your own sister, what else could you hide from me? Emma never had an answer. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hello? A quiet voice replied. Olivia. It was Dad. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I stayed silent. I just wanted to tell you something. Another pause. I've moved out. I frowned. What? I left the house. The words caught me completely off guard. I couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. He sighed. Your mother still believes everyone owes her an apology. And you? I finally understand that I owe one to you. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he asked quietly. I don't expect forgiveness. But someday. Would you be willing to have coffee with me? I looked at the rain falling outside my apartment. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. Now, I simply answered. I'll think about it. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't goodbye either. For the first time in years, the decision belonged to me. 2 weeks later, I found myself sitting outside a small coffee shop overlooking the waterfront in Seattle. I arrived 10 minutes early. Old habit. Dad walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He looked older. Not because of his gray hair. Because of the guilt. He hesitated before sitting down. Thank you for coming. I nodded politely. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, he took a deep breath. I owe you more than an apology. I looked at him. What do you mean? He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. There are things you were never told. I felt my stomach tighten. When you were 16, you received an acceptance letter to the California Arts Academy. I frowned. I never applied there. Dad lowered his eyes. You did. I saw the application. You spent weeks working on it. I stared at him. No. I would have remembered. He slowly shook his head. You never saw the acceptance letter. A chill ran through my body. What are you saying? He swallowed. Your mother intercepted it. For several seconds, I couldn't even breathe. Why? She believed if you left home before Emma graduated, the family would fall apart. I laughed in disbelief. So she stole my future? He nodded. I found the letter years later. You knew? I did. And you never told me? He closed his eyes. I was afraid. There it was again. Afraid. Always afraid. You had a full scholarship, he whispered. They wanted you. They even called the house twice. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. My entire life flashed before me. The jobs I'd taken. The dreams I'd abandoned. The years I'd spent wondering why no art school had ever answered my application. All because someone had decided my life belonged to them. Tears rolled silently down my face. Dad reached across the table. I gently pulled my hand away. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I just couldn't let you spend another year believing you weren't good enough. For the first time, I understood something. The wedding hadn't been the beginning. It had only exposed decades of control. 3 days later, Rebecca called again. Her voice sounded worried. Emma moved out. What? Ryan asked for a separation. I closed my eyes. He said he doesn't know who she really is anymore. Apparently, the lies surrounding the wedding had poisoned everything. Trust. Respect. Even simple conversations. Their marriage had lasted less than a month before beginning to fall apart. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mom. Not a call. A text. You're destroying this family. I hope you're finally happy. I stared at the message. Months earlier, those words would have broken me. Now, they only confirmed what I'd finally learned. Some people will always blame the person who tells the truth, instead of the one who created the lie. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my messages, selected her name, and quietly pressed delete conversation. Not because I hated her. Because I was finally choosing peace. As I set my phone aside, another notification appeared. An email. From an attorney in Santa Barbara. The subject line read, regarding the Carter family estate. I frowned. I had no idea that opening that email would change everything one last time. I stared at the email for several seconds before opening it. The sender was a law office in Santa Barbara. At first, I assumed it had something to do with the wedding contracts. It didn't. The message was short. Ms. Carter, we would appreciate the opportunity to meet with you regarding matters connected to your late grandmother's estate. Your presence is requested at your earliest convenience. I frowned. My grandmother had passed away almost 3 years earlier. Everything had supposedly been settled. At least, that's what my parents had always told me. A week later, I flew back to California. Not for my family. For answers. The attorney welcomed me into his office and placed a thick folder on the desk. "Ms. Carter," he began. "I believe there is information you were never given." He slid a document toward me. It was my grandmother's handwritten will. Halfway down the page, I saw my name. Olivia Carter. My heart stopped. Grandma had left me a small beach cottage outside Santa Barbara, along with an investment account she had quietly built over 20 years. I looked up in disbelief. There must be a mistake. There isn't. The inheritance was always intended for you. I stared at the papers. Then why am I only hearing about this now? The attorney hesitated. Because your mother declined to notify you. Silence filled the room. According to the records, Grandma had written a letter explaining everything. She had worried that I always carried the family's burdens while asking for nothing in return. She wanted me to have one place in the world that belonged only to me. No conditions. No expectations. Just home. The attorney handed me the envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Grandma's familiar handwriting covered every page. Olivia. If you're reading this, it means life didn't unfold the way I hoped. You have spent your whole life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. Please stop proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. One day you'll realize that peace is worth far more than approval. When that day comes, this little house is yours. Fill it with people who choose you. By the time I finished reading, I was crying harder than I had on the day of the wedding. Not because I was heartbroken. Because someone had finally loved me without asking for anything in return. That evening, I drove to the cottage. It overlooked the Pacific Ocean. The paint had faded. The garden needed work. The porch creaked with every step. It was perfect. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. The following morning, my father came to see me. He stood outside the gate until I walked over. "I heard about your grandmother's letter," he said quietly. "I wish I'd had her courage." I smiled sadly. She believed in me. So do I. I looked at him for a long moment. "I know." He nodded. "I don't expect us to become a family overnight. We won't. But if you'll let me, I'd like to start earning my place in your life. For the first time since everything began." I hugged him. It wasn't because the past had disappeared. It hadn't. It was because healing sometimes begins with one honest step. Mom never came. She never called. She never apologized. Months later, Rebecca told me she still insisted she had done nothing wrong. Surprisingly, that no longer hurt. Some people spend their entire lives protecting their pride. Others choose peace. I had finally made my choice. 6 months later, the little beach cottage looked completely different. Fresh paint. Flowers in the garden. A small art studio facing the ocean. Every Saturday morning I painted while listening to the waves. Something I'd dreamed of doing since I was 16. The dream my mother had tried to bury had finally found its way back to me. Emma eventually wrote one last letter. Not asking for money. Not asking for forgiveness. Only apologizing. I read it. Folded it carefully. And placed it inside Grandma's letter. Some wounds take years to heal. Others leave scars forever. Both can still teach us how to live. Looking back now, I realize the wedding wasn't the worst day of my life. It was the day I stopped begging for a place in a family that had already decided to erase me. It was the day I began building one of my own. Because family isn't defined by the people who share your last name. It's defined by the people who stand beside you when it matters most. And sometimes, the most important person who chooses you is yourself.